out the offer of diplomacy, outlining ways that the US and Russia can work out better confidence-building measures regarding security arrangements in Eastern Europe. Last week, I outlined Russia's interests and strengths in this crisis. It's vital to understand its weaknesses as well. When Putin took Crimea in 2014, he lost Ukraine, Owen Matthews writes in a thought-provoking essay. You see, after it declared independence in 1991, Ukraine was divided between an unabashedly pro-Russian segment of its population and a more nationalistic one. But by annexing Crimea and plunging eastern Ukraine into open conflict, Matthews points out, Putin has energized Ukrainian nationalism and fed a growing anti-Russian sentiment. And the math doesn't help. Putin took millions of pro-Russian Ukrainians in Crimea and the Donbass out of the country's political calculus. Those in the Donbass don't vote in Ukrainian elections because the area is too unstable. As a result, a Ukrainian politician estimated to me that the pro-Russian seats in Ukraine's parliament have shrunk from a plurality to barely 15% of the total. In retrospect, if Putin's aim were to keep Ukraine unstable and weak, it would probably have made far more sense to leave those parts of Ukraine within the country, supporting the pro-Russian forces and politicians in various ways so they could act as a kind of fifth column within Ukraine, always urging Kyiv to forge closer ties with Moscow. Instead, Ukraine is now composed mainly of a population that is proudly nationalist and has become much more anti-Russian. Now, Putin's aims are probably twofold: to make Ukraine weak and more dependent on Russia, but also to divide the West and render NATO less effective. As far as the latter is concerned, the opposite is happening. NATO, long searching for a post-Cold War purpose, has been energized by the Russian threat. Denmark is dispatching a frigate to the Baltic Sea. The Netherlands is moving fighter jets to Bulgaria. France has offered to put troops in Romania under NATO command. Spain is dispatching warships east. And the US has put 8,500 troops on heightened alert in case they need to be deployed to Eastern Europe. Some in Finland and Sweden are even reconsidering their long-established neutrality. The most significant success for Putin has been in Germany. The new German ruling coalition has expressed doubts about arming Ukraine, placing Russia under serious sanctions, or canceling Nord Stream 2, the pipeline through which Russia could sell more gas directly to Germany and Europe, bypassing Ukraine. This approach reflects a long-standing German desire to have a special relationship with Russia, an attitude expressed during the Cold War by an approach they called Ostpolitik. More recently, ex-Chancellor Angela Merkel, who as a former East German had lived under communism, was more tough-minded in her dealings with Putin. In the wake of her departure, Germany appears to be returning to its more traditional search for a middle ground between East and West. The Biden administration has been alert to this problem, sending CIA Director Bill Burns to Berlin and inviting Merkel's successor, Olaf Scholz, to Washington for a meeting with President Biden. Matthews points out that Putin would not benefit from a war, especially if the sanctions being discussed are put into place against Russia. While Putin has built formidable foreign exchange reserves, constraining Russia's gas and oil exports would devastate the Russian economy. Most young adult Russians, those who would be called upon to fight, are not gung-ho for a war against Ukraine, which they regard positively. Now, this doesn't mean that war is impossible or even unlikely. Wars can happen because of misperceptions, misunderstandings, miscalculations, and even because backed into a corner, countries find they can't find a path to de-escalate. The Russian foreign minister has said that the West's recent written responses to Russian demands do not address the main issue, by which he means Ukrainian membership in NATO. The truth is that Ukraine is unlikely to become a member of NATO anytime soon. NATO runs by consensus, and there is little agreement on the issue. Germany and Hungary, for example, have deep reservations about accession. And yet, the United States cannot and should not forswear the possibility that Ukraine could join NATO at some point in the future. Between those two realities lies a narrow corridor, a space for creative diplomacy to avert a war that could consume the energies of both sides for years. Go to